Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares, and we're delighted you're here. We broadcast 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to take us with you as you travel, there's a listen line, 605-477-3249. Captain John Regan's with us, and John is engineering the broadcast at GCN. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Well, John had some problems before the broadcast started. And the reason I'm not mentioning it to talk about woe is me. That's not it. The reason I'm mentioning this is, everything's fine until something goes wrong. And I had a small computer problem this morning. I've got multiple computers in the studio, and on Monday mornings, I'll boot them well in advance, way over an hour in advance, start them all up, and I hear this little different beep. Hard drive failure. That's okay. It just happens to be the computer that connects us to GCN. So, a little bit of reconfiguring, and we made the broadcast. But the point I'm trying to make is, that hard drive in the computer could have been a showstopper, okay? It really could have. Just like the engine control module in your car, your automobile can be a showstopper. It can prevent you from getting to work, okay? Worse than that, it can fail in traffic. It could fail on the interstate. It could fail in a busy city. And tow charges may be $175 or more, plus $120 repair per hour. And that is why I believe people buy new cars, because they don't want that to happen to them. And I understand it. I really do. But the problem is that we have gotten to the point with vehicles that they are so complex that they are difficult for the shade tree mechanic, the do-it-yourselfer, to maintain. For example, the new cars are lower to the ground. How do you get under them to change the oil? It's a little difficult, more difficult than it's ever been. And newer cars have these aerodynamic belly pans made out of plastic to let them slip through the air at highway speeds more efficiently. So not only do you have to get under them with less clearance, but you have to remove a belly pan. And it requires a couple jacks, maybe 4 jack stands, getting on your back to change the oil. And many people are just saying it's not worth it. I'll just bring it to that quick change place. So we've let this happen, and I'm going the other way. I'm going to older technology. But with older technology, and if you have an older vehicle, like I mentioned that old Mercedes that I bought, that 1996 21-year-old Mercedes, you have to do things like, well, how about the rubber parts? Are they bad? Are they good? Are they questionable? And if they're questionable, do you want that serpentine belt to fail that drives the alternator, the power steering, the engine cooling fan, alternator, and so forth? Do you want that to fail, or do you want to replace it before it fails? Now, before we had these traffic jams, and so many cars on the road, you could let it fail, and then you could, fix it on the side of the road. Just bring a spare belt with you. Now you don't want it to fail because you could get killed if that happens. So now we're replacing parts before they're necessary, which leads me to another part of the discussion. And one of our neighbors came over for a cup of coffee this week, and he just shows up. And that's, we love it. We have neighbors that just show up. And we were sitting at the kitchen table, and he said, he's got this automatic transmission mechanic he just loves. Just a great guy. Knows a lot about automatic transmissions, been a mechanic for years and years and years. And he seems to be able to diagnose problems very simply because of his wealth of knowledge. He said to my friend, even a good mechanic today, even a real good mechanic, can't fix new cars because they're so complex. And he's right. We can't fix our own computers because they're so complex. And I was thinking that this computer that failed, no problem. I can just reload Windows. Oh, man. Last time I did it, how long did it take? Almost a day. Almost a full day to reload the operating system and the other applications to make these computers work. John, does that seem like what you go through with computers too?
Well, I've ditched the old hard drive technology. I only use it for backup and archival purposes, and I've got a solid-state drive in my computer. Mm-hmm. And that is so much faster. There's no moving parts to wear out. I can boot within seconds. And it just, at today's prices, it just costs a little bit more. And I don't have as large a drive as I'd have in there as if it were a hard drive, but because I archive stuff off, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Well, I can boot within seconds too, John, about 360 seconds. I know that for a fact because there are many times when I fire up the computer to broadcast, or if I leave the computer on overnight, I'll find out that, boy, it's really running slow. I just reboot it, 3 or 4 minutes before broadcast time. And I go, oh, man, I can't believe it takes this long. And it does. So what does it cost to get something like, 256 gig in solid state? Or half that? You ever thought? Did I lose you, John?
I'll look that up during the break and let you know.
Okay, all right, that sounds great. Okay, very good. Well, John, I'm at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. I'm looking at today's class. I've clicked on the news tab, resources for USA Prepares, January 30. Here, the Watchman Conference, you're going to be speaking in Dallas in March 31 through April 2. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Now, if you click that link, it takes you to the Hear the Watchman website. A lot of fantastic speakers. Several of them are coming from your neck of the woods, from the Skywatch TV group, which is Tom Horn's group. And the topics have not been announced yet, but you can be sure they're outstanding. And what's nice about the Hear the Watchman format is you don't have to make a decision on which one you want to listen to. You're probably going to want to get the DVDs anyway, but at least here, you don't have to wait for that to hear what the other speaker said, because everybody's in the same room at the same time. And because of the venue, they're limited to 1,000, so you really want to get your tickets before they run out. And it's, you can actually, meet with, like-minded people. You get a chance to talk with the speakers fairly easily. It's really great.
Mm-hmm. What's your topic going to be on, John?
I'm still working on that myself. I think it's going to be kind of a, where do we go from here type of talk, given what we went through with the election and last year, and continuing on with the insanity we're seeing this year.
That sounds great. Proactive, forward-looking. That sounds great. John, you want to talk about onions?
Yeah, it's enough to make you cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
there's been a lot of snow west of the Rockies, and in fact, even in Colorado, there. I mean, it's been a rather brutal winter with the amount of snow they've received. I mean, we're talking about feet of snow, not just a foot of snow. And in the Idaho, Oregon area, the onion industry is estimating their losses are reaching $100 million. And, in real world terms, millions mean things. And in a particular industry, 100 million is just, astronomical. And what's happened is all this snow has caused a bunch of the storage sheds to collapse, as well as packing facilities, just dozens of buildings. This region produces about 25% of the nation's big bulb storage onions. The prices have pretty much tripled. A 50-pound bag was going for like $3.50 and is now $10. And you look at some of the devastation that just certain companies have had. But then what's not talked about in this article is the collateral effects to the area. This affects the migrant workers who would come in, whether they're here legal or illegal doesn't really matter much. Now they're having to find someplace else to work. You've got the school systems there that would teach the kids of the migrants, and because they don't have those kids in class, that cuts the funds that they get from the government, which puts pressure on the budgets, and this might be a groaner. It just kind of snowballs.
Mm-hmm. And John, if you just think about some of the uses of onions, McDonald's. How is McDonald's going to sell hamburgers without onions? Because not that I'm recommending going to McDonald's because I don't eat there, but a McDonald's hamburger will not taste the same without onions. And as far as I know, onions are used to treat angina. Class Captain John Regan's with us. We are at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. We've clicked on the news tab, and that is the list of today's activities if you'd like to follow along in class with us. And we're talking about onions, and they've been used to treat angina, coughs, bacterial infections, breathing problems. Onions are used to prevent atherosclerosis. So there are plenty of reasons why onions are important for us in our diet, and we are looking at a potential shortage of onions because of the snow and the storage facilities' roof collapse. Big problem, John. It's a lot bigger than we may think.
Well, the good news is 75% of the supply is not from that area. The bad news is you may be paying 3 times as much for that type of onion.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I did look up the solid-state drives.
Yeah.
Those that are in the 128 gig range, I'm seeing between $45 and $50, and the 120 gigabyte range in the 240 gigabytes range in the $70 to $75.
Okay, so John, if I want to replace a hard drive in one of these computers, I can just put in one of these as an SATA. Will it look like an SATA hard drive?
Yes, these are SATA interface. Typically, they're 2.5-inch size drives. So if you're going into a desktop computer, you might have to have an adapter so it fits in the drive bay. But so long as it's a SATA interface, you're good. What got me on the last update is I didn't know what was inside my computer. It had, and what it uses are the newer SSD drives, which are more like a stick of gum.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go with a new type computer, you need to know exactly what interface is inside.
Okay, what about cooling? Are we looking at cooling fins on these devices because the density of the memory is so high, or is that not an issue at all?
It's really not an issue because well, look at the memory that's in the computer. You're just putting those sticks in, and the CPU tends to get hot, but the memory itself doesn't. And then when you consider the way computer architecture works, the hard drive is basically kind of working like a file cabinet. So you're going out to get pieces of what you're working on, and you put it into memory, which is kind of like your desktop, and then what's right in front of you to work on is like what your CPU is. And it's that CPU gets the most activity and has the least amount of memory available to it. Your desktop only holds so much, which is the RAM that's in your computer. And then it's kind of like, how big a filing cabinet do you need before you go to the storage room, which is where, like I say, I use hard drives to archive stuff off. But with the USB interfaces of today, especially when you get to the higher speed USB, plugging in one of those external drives to do backup isn't very painful at all.
Now, do you do things like disk cleanup or the equivalent of a disk drive cleanup and a defragmentation as well on these solid-state drives?
You do not do that, and you would not want to do that because these are flash-based drives. They only have so many write cycles in them, so you wouldn't want to go through the torture of doing any kind of defragmentation. And because they're memory instead of disk, you don't have to worry about the latency. Because with a hard drive, even though it's spinning very fast, you have to wait for that hard drive to get to the head to start as read-write. Plus, for the tracks, you have to wait for the head to get to the appropriate track. All of that goes away with these solid-state drives.
Okay, so what is a little bit foreign to me because I have not used one of these as a main storage device in a computer. But the reason that many of us will defragment a hard drive is to reapply magnetism to the surface of the platter to strengthen that write so that that data will live there longer. But that's the opposite of what you do with a solid-state drive. Captain John Regan, what's next?
Let me just finish up a little bit on this SSD drive. And if you have a notebook that's 2.5-inch form factor, the drive I had was a 7 millimeter height, so it's pretty much just a drop-in replacement for your older notebooks that use the 2.5-inch hard drive factor. And what I got, and I'll tell you the reason why. I got the SanDisk brand, which was one of the better prices and good reviews. And another company, Apricom, APRICOM, has a SATA notebook hard drive upgrade kit that has the external drive enclosure and software which only works with the SanDisk drive. And how it works is, and this is one of the best external hard drive enclosures I've ever used. You don't have to mess with screws or anything. It's really nice. So you put the SSD drive in there, connect the USB, run the software, and so long as you have a working hard drive, you copy the hard drive off to the SSD, then you just swap the drives. It's a pretty painless process, and because it's SSD, it doesn't take as long. If you're back in the old days where you're copying hard drive to hard drive, copying hard drive to SSD does go quicker. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, so are you saying that you need to have the solid-state drive, like the circuit board card, if you will, with the gold fingers on it, and you need to buy an enclosure as well?
You need to have a way, and like I say, as long as you have a working hard drive and you're not wanting to reload from scratch. You need to have a way of having the SSD drive connected to your computer so that you can copy. And the easiest way of doing that is using one of the external drive kits where you so you make it just where you're plugging in the USB and it recognizes the external drive, and at that point you can copy. And there's certainly other brands out there where you can get the enclosures. There's other software out there, but this drive kit cost me $35. So to get the enclosure and software for that price, I just couldn't resist sticking to that type of package.
Okay, so let me see if I understand. In my case, I've got a hard drive that doesn't work. It won't. My PC won't boot because the hard drive has failed. But if that were not the case, and I did have a working hard drive, are you saying that I could copy and mirror that hard drive? That if I did have a working booting operational hard drive, I could copy everything over, replace the hard drive with this solid state drive, and it would act like the hard drive, and everything would be just as it was, but faster without the original hard drive. Is that correct?
Exactly. And now you put that hard drive into this enclosure, and you've got a backup device for your computer, and you can use that very same software to back up to the hard drive, so that if for some reason your SSD goes down, you can pop into the hard drive and keep going.
Great idea. Okay, I'm going to work on that after the broadcast. Okay.
And with what my experience is, you can go from total power off state to logged in under 30 seconds with the usable computer. And a lot of that time is getting that password keyed in. If you're running without a password, it's a lot faster than that. And if you do the sleep mode, I mean, by the time you've got your password in, you're up and going. All those normal startup tasks just run so much faster that you're not sitting there waiting for your computer to become responsive again.
Now, I remember calling you one day saying, it was just like a couple minutes to 9 o'clock, and we were going to go on the air, and our instructor was unable to make it, and I said, "Hey, John, how you doing? Would you like to go on the air?" And you said, "When?" "No, I don't know, about 90 seconds, a minute." And he said, "Okay, I can do it, but it's going to take almost 5, 6, 7 minutes for your PC to boot." Now, this is that same kind of booting process that you're now accomplishing in 30 seconds. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I was really clear and that we explained this to those who've been following us for years in class. Okay, very good. Thanks for the lesson. I appreciate it, and I'm going to work on it today. I've got eBay in front of me, and I'm looking at all kinds of solid-state drives.
And speaking of computers, 3D printers can be deadly.
I read the story. Pretty sad.
And this is out of San Francisco, and a couple and their 2 cats were found dead because they were poisoned by carbon monoxide from their 3D printer. And it's not like these are dumb people. Both of them were MIT grads. And, I'm sure they trusted the technology. And, unfortunately, that's what you get. I would not want to have a 3D printer in my home. If you use one, I would recommend, if you have a garage or somewhere where you can not have it in your house in a well-ventilated area, because besides carbon monoxide, these printers give off other kinds of gases, and you're breathing that stuff in, and some of those fumes can affect your health, and, as this shows, all the way up to the toxic level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got an exclamation point to put on that. I've had a problem with one of our Deutsch tractors. It's about 100 horsepower and had a hydraulic pipe leak. It's a steel pipe that moves hydraulic fluid from the pump that's mounted to the engine to the back of the transmission under the seat. And so I need to cut off in a very precise way some of the old fitting. And it's metric. So my Dremel from 1974 has finally failed, and I needed to get another one. I was looking at Dremels on eBay, and I found one that was an unbranded Dremel kit, had everything I needed in it to do the job. And it was a very reasonable price. So I bought it. And it arrived, and I immediately plugged it in, and the motor skipped. It would hesitate. And it'd be like, think of it like this. You're trying to operate this precise device, like maybe like a dentist trying to drill a tooth, and the drill in his hand is skipping, and it's jumping a little bit. And it's impossible to hold this thing because it would hiccup, or it would, if it were an engine, it'd be misfiring. Well, I contacted the guy, and then we worked it out, and that's fine. But here's the point. This Dremel, I opened the package from the post office when it arrived, and it smelled so bad that I've been airing this thing out for several days in the sun and in the wind because the smell is so strong of the plastic of this case and the Dremel and the accessories and the power cord that it's impossible to keep this thing in the house. So when we think about, modern technology, and we think about the air pollution in China, and we think about these 3 printers off-gassing, in this case, carbon dioxide, right? Carbon monoxide. There's a lot to be thought about with some of these devices we bring in our homes. Another thing to think about is what was in the UPS truck or the Federal Express truck or the mail carrier truck. Were there any radioactive devices? Were there any other toxic substances? Was there any dust in there that was dangerous, chemical, poisonous dust that's on our package that we put on our kitchen table or we put on the chair at the kitchen table when we open up these packages? Something to think about. Are we poisoning ourselves with what's on the packages that arrive for us when we purchase them through the common carriers? Just one more thing to think about, class. John?
Yeah, and New York City is working on their No Place Left to Hide program. They're installing facial recognition cameras that will be used to match up to your driver's license and social media accounts at bridges and tunnels. So any place that's an island like New York City where you've got all these choke points, it's pretty easy to keep track of who's coming and going. They could probably do the same thing with Galveston Island here in Texas. And it's, this is the early stages of the Smart City program where they keep track of everything. And then they just add some more software on top of that to predict crime so that you get into the Minority Report situation where you're arrested for your pre-crime so that you don't commit it.
Well, John, we've been talking for several years now about what we call the cheese graters. And those are those heavy aircraft-style cables that run parallel to the highway, the interstates, and they run in the medians, and they say these are great for preventing crossover accidents, meaning someone in the northbound lane losing control, going into the median, and hitting a vehicle in the southbound lane, that kind of thing. Well, what they've formed is these gauntlets that force you to go a particular direction. And there's no turning around, there's no getting into the median, getting out of the way. If you have a failure of a tire or a wheel or something like that, or an engine failure, or any other kind of failure, and you think, well, I'll just pull into the median where it's safe, in that grassy median. It's very difficult, especially in Missouri. Well, all it takes is setting up some cones, because we have this funnel, and these guys could set up under a bridge, they could set up their cameras, form a gauntlet where everybody goes a little slower because the cones force you from 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 1 lane. Now everybody's going slowly, and it's picture time. You take your picture and put it in the database. One other thing you might want to think about, class, is when you get your picture taken for your driver's license. Most people want to look their very, very best for that very important picture that they flash to their friends. In my picture, my eyes are closed. I just couldn't help it. Just thinking about that flash going off causes my eyes to close. So there it is, my driver's license picture for the state of Missouri, eyes closed. Captain John Regan's with us. John, just one more thing about this this carbon monoxide poisoning of these two MIT graduates who are using a 3D printer. The problem seems to be when lasers are applied to certain types of plastics, and those plastics emit these fumes. Now, carbon monoxide is odorless and colorless. So, and that's what happens when people park their car in their garage, close the garage, and they want to commit hara-kiri. That's the same gas that's used for that. So, pretty sad that here we have some very intelligent people. They've graduated Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They're using a 3D printer, and the gas from the lasers interacting with the plastic that they're using to print with kills them. And then, of course, what about people who live in buildings where they share common heating systems, common air conditioning systems, and you've got the guy next door using a laser printer, a 3D printer, and they may be polluting the same air that you breathe. So just another thought about how complex our lives have become. Unintended consequences, John.
Absolutely. Next up, this can lead to war. And this article talks about how even though China has the world's largest population, they don't have enough babies. And this gets into that demographics that I bring up. It's for me tougher to talk about on the radio than finances, because you have to see this develop over time, because you can't.
Okay, are you there, John? Huh. Did we lose John Regan? Oh, I guess we lost John Regan, and are you there, John? It looks like we're connecting with Captain John Regan right now. Sometimes this happens. I'm looking at my screens, and okay. John, you're back.
Isn't Skype wonderful?
Now, John, just as a side, how long would this have taken you if you had a hard drive? Would it have been longer or about the same?
This wouldn't matter because it wasn't a reboot situation. I just had to redial since the call dropped.
Okay.
Anyway, talking about China, they have many demographic problems, but it's what's happening pretty much everywhere that's not a big-time Muslim country is that you've got this negative replacement rate, so that you're not replenishing your population. So you're getting people that are older, and because they're eating a bad diet, thanks to our processed food and GMOs, they tend to be in poorer health. And even if the few that do manage to get there without, back and knee injuries, still when you get older, you just can't do as much as you used to when you were young.
Yeah.
With few exceptions out there. And, and this gets to be a problem of how do you take care of all those people. And when you start getting these internal revolts, the government tends to go to external wars to, shift the anger from the government to an adversary. And when you get in another situation here where you've got not as many youth, and with China it might not matter just simply because of the size of the population, you would have to go to a nastier war than you would have more like in the good old World War II days.
Really good point. And, I don't know of any individuals who start wars. It's governments who seem to start these wars and get us killed. Very good point, John. What are we going to talk about when we come back from these few short commercial announcements on top of the hour news?
Well, I do want to touch on the Can You Hear Me, and then we'll get into wargaming.
Okay. Can You Hear Me? What a great story that is. No kidding, class. It involves deception. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Why did I say that? Because that is what Captain John Regan and I are going to talk about next. Can you hear me? This is a phone scam that's unbelievable. And please, class, pay attention. This is a brilliant scam. Whoever thought of this it's really simple, but it absolutely, I believe this absolutely positively works in hoodwinking us. Captain John Regan?
Yeah, isn't technology great?
Yeah.
It looks like it's a tool, and unfortunately, it can be used as a tool for the bad guys as well. This even made our local mainstream news here, and so you may have heard this, but if not, it's so important. Then that's why I put it in the lineup for today. You get a call, and when you answer the phone, you're not really thinking so much. Your mind's kind of on cruise control. Just waiting for the upcoming conversation, and there's probably a number of ways this can be done, but one of them is that you'll hear the person fumbling with their headset, and then, can you hear me? And when you answer yes, they've got that recorded. And there's all kinds of ways by phone that you can create a contract for, buying something. And what they will do is they'll use that recording of you saying yes as proof that you consented, even though it's not the whole of the conversation. So
John,
go ahead.
If we were to do that right this minute, and I said, John, can you hear me? You would say what?
Yeah, your natural reactions. Yeah.
Great. You just bought those storm doors and storm windows. Wow. Yeah, you're right.
So you just be aware, and if you get a call that ends up going that way, just hang up, or if you think it might possibly be legit, instead of saying yeah, say, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Right back at them. And
that's a really good point, John. I have made it a point in recently, last 6 months or so, that I do not answer the phone if the person doesn't identify who he or she is with caller ID. So, for example, if it says blocked, or unknown, or something like that, I don't answer it. It's as simple as that. I don't answer it. And if I don't recognize the number, it goes right to the answering machine. Now, I can call back. If the person says, "Hey, Vinny, it's me. I'm calling from another number," that's great. But if I don't recognize the person, I probably won't call back.
Let me give you an idea how this technology can really be used against you. Say you did a YouTube video that you posted so that they can capture some of your voice. In fact, you may even have said yes in the video, but the point is there's now software that will recreate your voice. And when you look at your caller ID, that's not necessarily where the call's coming from. The caller ID can be spoofed. So they could go in, spoof the caller ID so that their phone system records that they got a call from your number. And with the software, they can be playing through their computer at that point, answering yes. And what are you going to do to defend yourself? It's insane.
Very good, very, very good point, John, because I have noticed over the last 6 months, 12 months or so, that we had been getting calls from, it would identify who it is, and it would be the name of some company. And it would be a telemarketing call. And what they did was they would find I'm in Missouri, They would find, for example, a company in Texas, a company in Florida that had just gone out of business. And when they went out of business, they no longer had need for their phone number. So that phone number became available. But a couple days before, it was a viable number. So they would use that company's name and number as a spoof to call me. But that wasn't the number that they were calling from. It was an entirely different number that I could not see. And so when I go to call them back and say, I'd look them up, and I'd find out some plumbing company or something, I'd go to call them back, and that number would not be the number that called me, although it said it was. So it was spoofed. And it's annoying. And one of the things that, I don't want our government to do very much for me, but one of the things I'd like them to do is to protect us from these nuisance calls, especially since we are on one of those no-call lists that obviously is not doing very much good at all. Because these companies that call us to try to sell us financial instruments, debt instruments and so forth, I don't want to take those calls. And they're not. Our government is not protecting us from that. That's one thing I'd like them to do, because they pledged to do that, right? And we're paying them to do that. And they're doing a miserable job of it. It almost seems like if you sign up for a do not call, add your number to the do not call list, it's like an invitation to get calls. What's next?
Let's talk wargaming. And this is a two-part article. And, I was an Air Force officer for 8.5 years out of college. And war planning was part of my job. And then once I hit the Pentagon for the last 2.5 years, working on the nuclear planning system, war planning was my life. And, things change. And if you're not in the arena, you may not know how things work. The way I've heard it said is amateurs talk about strategy and tactics. And, it's true on the battlefield, there's some strategy and tactics. But what it's really about is the psychology and logistics. And this is where these articles start getting into. And I thought this would help, just give some background. One, it starts off talking about America and the United States in particular, and what our situation is. We've got oceans on both sides, and there's not too much danger from fish. And even when you are projecting naval power with battleships and aircraft carriers, there's only so much you can do with that against a country the size of the United States. You have to have a supply chain to go along with that to sustain any kind of conflict. And then we just border two countries. On the north is Canada, which is lightly populated, and for a reason that would not be very easy trying to attack from the north over land because of the Arctic Circle and the terrain. On the south, you've got more of a desert region in the southwest area there, and it's lightly populated. So from both sides on land, we're in pretty good shape there. But we don't live in the good old World War II type days. So the number one topic they have here is nuclear strike. And so often I hear the media talk about North Korea and using ICBMs. Well, why would you want to do that when you can use a smaller missile, put it on a ship, and just drive it off the coast? And especially since our southern border doesn't really have the radar systems that the northern side has, because it was there to detect a major strike from the Soviet Union. So you launched 2 or 3 missiles from the coast, and that EMP pretty much takes out America as a civilization. Now, of course, we still have military out there that would do some strikes of their own, but doing it with a ship-based attack like that, it brings up the tough question as to who do you attack in retaliation? Whereas when it's done with a missile launch ICBM, you know who's doing the attack, and the football that goes with the president already has answers for that. And in our modern world, we've got terrorism. There's many different ways of accomplishing that. And, besides states using nukes, you get a terrorist organization, especially consider a country like Pakistan that does have nukes. It's not stable if just a handful of those gets out with, again, so just fairly short-range surface-to-air missiles. You can accomplish the same thing you did as in the first part there. We'll pick up with number 3 and 4 when we get back.
Yeah, Captain John Regan's with us. TheFinancialStateOfTheUnion.com. We've clicked on the news tab. We'll be right back. Last, we've been talking with Captain John Regan about war games, nuclear planning. John, please continue.
I guess I'll back up a little bit. When I first went on active duty, even though I'd had 3 years of ROTC in college, 4 years of junior ROTC in high school, I'd never heard of Sun Tzu. And the book is called Sun Tzu and the Art of War. And that was part of my curriculum in Squadron Officer School when I was a young lieutenant. And after reading that, I understood why we lost Vietnam. Besides the restrictions that the Democrats put on our military back then. If you look at North Vietnam compared to the United States, it's ridiculous that we could lose a normal war. But when you go to non-conventional warfare, it becomes another matter. And the type of warfare we're talking here is ways of getting around our natural borders that we have protecting us from foreign wars. And you look at the history of the United States, Britain didn't have much luck with the Revolutionary War. Very tough to fight, long distance. The worst war we had was the Civil War, as far as losses of people go here in America. But and even with World War I, World War II, all the technology they had with the tanks and the submarines and the surface ships, it still wasn't really a threat for the United States. But with nukes, it's a different story. And you think about how much gets smuggled across the border, whether you're talking about people or let's just use illegal drugs as examples. Tons and tons of illegal drugs cross the border to be sold in America. If you wanted to, get 2 or 3 bombs in, it's not that much compared to the tons of drugs. And if you only want to look at the material, the uranium or plutonium you'd use for the bomb, that's only about the size of a grapefruit. So it's not like you've got to, try to get a pallet of something through. So you need that, and you also need certain additional equipment that requires technology to produce. And that's why terrorist organizations aren't up to that speed yet, but the state players are. So the devices that you need to make the material go critical, I guess the good news is it's not something you just get off the shelf, but you can take that in, and you don't need a missile to deliver to cause havoc. You could just take it to top floor of one of the taller buildings in downtown, and you've made some significant damage. And that's kind of a combination of the nuke and terrorism. Well, continuing on, cyber warfare, you don't even have to get across the border. We're connected by computer, and there's so much that can happen there. In fact, the departing Homeland Security chief a few years ago said that 100% chance that our utilities will be taken down by a cyber attack. And it's not a matter of just rebooting computers. What it does is it takes your production facilities and the safeguards you had built in to keep things within operating parameters get wiped out, and it ends up destroying equipment. And it's replacing that equipment that becomes critical. And we've talked about what happens when you don't have the power grid, you don't have the supply chain, and if you don't have the supply chain, it doesn't take very long before civilization just falls apart.
It's a really good point, John. That's a really good point, because I'm frustrated with just trying to keep our farm equipment working, because the United States can't decide whether it's the metric system or the SAE system, and so we've got both, and the parts are not necessarily interchangeable. The dimensions are different. It's a problem. Captain John Regan's with us. John, please continue.
So we've been talking about ways of reducing or eliminating America's power in a non-traditional warfare frame of reference. Number 4 on the list is disinformation, however you want to call it, fake news, propaganda, and this also kind of dovetails with what we've been seeing lately. And if we look at the history of the United States, this country has never been just a united country. Back during the Revolutionary War, George Washington was instrumental in fighting for our independence, but his mother was a loyalist. She wanted to stick with England. So even in families, just like today, there's been division. And it's kind of settled pretty much into, for the most part, 3 categories today. You've got the Republican Party, you've got the Democrat Party, and then you've got the people that are kind of confused and don't know which way they want to go, that end up tossing the elections between one party and the other. And in addition to that, we've had some other layers, and I might even make this a number 5, is the invasion of America. And this is both with people and with ideals. You have La Raza, who wants to take back especially the Southwest by getting a Hispanic population in there. And that's not to say that just because somebody is Hispanic, they're trying to work against the United States. I went to school with people that, their ancestors had legally migrated and immigrated into the United States, and they were just as patriotic Americans as the rest of us. But there are those that, want to take pieces of the United States back from Mexico, and they tend to be a little bit on the violent side as well. And they'll use the loyalty of the ancestry for those that maybe aren't here to cause problems to aid their cause. We've also got the history where the Soviet Union came in, the communists infiltrated the black culture and destroyed the black families, and you ended up with all these families without the father figure in the household, and we've seen the mess that that's caused with the black community. And we've even talked about how they want to create their own nation in the South. And then you've got Islam on the world stage attempting to do the same thing, and very successfully. Right now, if Europe doesn't wake up soon and get the Muslims out, there will not be a Europe as we've known. You can look into history, and I believe it was the Battle of Salzburg, where if Europe had lost that battle, they would have been Muslim, centuries ago. And we're experiencing that here. You get they get the nice, smiling Muslims in front of the cameras. We're just nice people, until they get the population density to impose Sharia law, and that's just their mode of operation. It takes longer that way, but you don't have to fire a shot. And could even consider the financial realm as one of the non-traditional warfare. All Saudi has to do is start accepting currency or gold, anything. Right now they just require the dollar, so everybody else who wants to buy oil from them has to convert to dollars first. So if they trade directly in the native currency of the country they're selling to, or use gold, silver, whatever, the petrodollar just disintegrates. And again, we've talked about that before. As soon as they do that, it's a devaluation of the dollar, at least 30%, which means everything that we're used to buying effectively goes up in price for us. So war isn't just troops and tanks and planes and ships. Vincent?
John, I remember having lunch when I was employed as an officer of a bank in the cafeteria. And a number of the guys that I worked with were of similar age and of Vietnam War era. And I remember this one guy telling me that the restraints and conditions that were put on them were just ridiculous. For example, the guy was telling me that he was told to guard and move several prisoners that were captured by our side and to take them to another location. And they gave him one cartridge for his rifle. One cartridge. He couldn't take more than one cartridge. Now, there was the appearance that he had a magazine full of cartridges, but in fact he did not. And why would we do something like that? Why would we put one of our guys up against several of our enemy who are absolutely trying to kill us and give our guy one cartridge and put him in a relative disadvantageous position compared to having a full magazine? Why? Why would we do that? Have you heard stories like that too, John?
Well, you've also got the history of World War II with the Nazi Germany, and it wasn't just the Jews. There were other groups, and what the Nazis would do is lie to the groups, and by the time you accepted the lie, it was too late. You couldn't protect yourself anymore.
Are you talking about, this is great news, we're going to a relocation center where you'll be safe, that kind of thing?
Yes.
And just to hop on the train. Hey, listen, you don't need to bring all your stuff. We'll get that later. Don't worry about all your possessions. Just travel lightly. Yeah. And then you hop in the boxcar and there's no water, no food, no place to use the facilities. And you're just in this boxcar and you're going for a long journey. And at the end of the journey, there is a person at a desk surrounded by soldiers with weapons, and you either go to the right or to the left. And you don't know what that means. Separated from your family and executed forthwith. Others get to work until they're executed or die. Very, very good point, John.
So if that's not enough good news, the next link I entitled, "This Will Lead to War and Worse." The title of the article is "Future Silver Supply Will Be More Vulnerable Than Other Metals." And if you scroll down, you get to a slide that is titled, "Years Remaining of Global Metal Reserves." 38 years for copper, 20 years for silver, 19 years for gold, 19 years for lead, and 15 years for zinc. And just stop and think about that. We're talking about 2 decades, 4 important metals will no longer have any reserves. You have to go into some extreme recycling if you want to try and keep things going. And even with that, some of these are not easy to recycle, or you may need more than the amount that's currently in service. For example, silver with the current solar cells, it's critical. We talked recently about cobalt being needed for batteries. It's across the board in a number of areas. What do you do as you get closer and closer to these resources running out? And these are the lifeblood of economies. And as economies start to falter, again, we talked about, what governments do. They'll direct the anger away from the government to a foreign entity. And this is, what leads to war. And even if there isn't war, you've got a really tough situation to try to manage without the raw materials you need to run the economy.
John, I was looking at a chart last couple of weeks about electrical conductivity. And many of us may not have it right. When we think of what is the metal that is the most conductive, we may think it's gold, but it's not. It's silver. Silver is the most conductive metal. Number 2 is copper. Number 3 is gold. Number 4 is aluminum. So this is a problem, as you say, because silver is, well, it's better than copper by, I believe, about 5% better conductivity than copper. But when you get down to aluminum, if I'm not mistaken, you're down about 40% less conductivity, even though we use aluminum for service entrance cables in our homes and businesses. That's because it's cheap. Copper is a little more expensive, and silver is way more expensive than that, and gold is way more expensive than that. So you're right. The outlook is not all that good, is it?
Especially if you want to live this technological lifestyle that we have. And the next article talks about a solution saving the planet. And this is from an ecologist, University of Texas. To save the planet, kill off 90% of the people.
Yep. John, let me make sure I've got this right. So years remaining of global metal reserves: copper 38, silver 20, gold 19, lead 19, zinc 15. Was that right?
That's what they say.
Yeah. We'll be right back. If you'd like to contact John Regan, just go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, or eze33.org. John Regan?
And the eze33.org is a lot easier to type in. Well, you hear the term fascist a lot, especially since Trump's been elected. And this article explains what fascism really is. It's not the right, it's the left. It's, the socialism with with a hint of capitalism. Basically, what they'll do is you'll have private ownership available, but everything is controlled by the state. So we're pretty close to that in the United States. The government doesn't totally do the central control. We've got some limited markets, less so in the financial world because those have the computers doing high-frequency trading, and you've got all the paper assets out there that are used to manipulate the market of those assets. But when it comes to what we do in our day-to-day economy, that is still somewhat market-driven rather than driven by the government. However, the regulations, the licensing, the taxation, on and on and on, it's creeping there pretty quick. And in fact, a lot of what Trump is doing is the opposite of fascism. He's trying to reduce the regulations and control of the central government. So you can stick that in your bag. And I also want to mention that if you've seen the update or the post for the last couple of weeks, I don't have the normal news items below the discussion area. I'm just plain run out of time both weeks. I've got a backlog of items in my show folder. I'm going to see if I can get another post done this week that has those other news items that you can peruse. So you might want to just be on the lookout for that in a couple of days. And just to try and finish up hour two there, malls mauled. It's not good for physical retail in America, and malls are not cheap. And there's a Pittsburgh mall that was once worth $190 million that recently sold for $100. I have to wonder if they properly advertised that because the buyer was the bank that owns it. So they're obviously going to do the best to try and save their assets, if you know what I mean. The malls across America, and quite often these properties are rolled up into investable units that people buy for themselves, or they end up in pension funds, which we know are having trouble. And as we see more and more of these big anchor stores, the Sears, the JCPenney's, the Macy's, have problems and close stores. It makes more problems for the malls, which decreases their value, which makes more trouble for these investments, which, again, messes with the pension funds, which sooner or later that firecracker is going to go off and make a big bang.
John, when we, from a distance, want to look at how well a mall is doing, we can look at the parking lot. And we can look at the number of cars in the parking lot. That's an indication of commerce and activity, and whether a mall may or may not survive, or whether a mall may or may not doing very, very well. But an even easier method is to just look at the grass growing up in the cracks of the parking lot. And when you see that, you know that cars are not traveling over the parking lot, and you know that traffic is down, visitation is down, commerce is down, and that mall may be in trouble. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in our neck of the woods. Actually, we're seeing it all over. Captain John Regan, thank you so much for all your hard work and being with us today. John Harmon, Program Director of GCN, thank you for engineering the broadcast today. Class, above all, honesty